introduction before going to the in deep. Just we will see a basic introduction of GitHub Actions, that what exactly it is and why we are going to use it. The second, that is the essential features, and after that we will see the types of action, that what type of action we can actually use in our GitHub workflow or GitHub action. And then we will see the triggers for your GitHub action, that what different kind of trigger we can use. And at the last we will see the demo. So just like the other CI/CD tools, as we know the different types of tool that we used for the CI/CD, like Jenkins, Circle CI, and there are many more. So the GitHub action is same. We are use the GitHub actions for the CI/CD purpose. With the help of GitHub actions, we can automate our task within your software development lifecycle. It means that the whole workflow you can gonna automate that with the help of GitHub actions. So basically the GitHub actions are event driven. It means that whenever there is an event performed into your GitHub action can actually trigger. And there are the different components of GitHub actions. Whenever you are going to write your workflow file or a particular CI/CD pipeline, there are some components that you need to actually use to write your workflow file. So the way first is the workflow. It means that there can be the multiple workflows for your project or application. So this would be the one component of the GitHub action. The second is the events. As we already said that the GitHub actions are event driven, so you need to specify the events, that which type of events or on which events you need to actually trigger your workflows. The third one is jobs. Just like the let's suppose you want to perform a particular task. So for that a single task we can call it as a job. So you need to specify the different jobs for your workflow, that what exactly the task you need to perform. So for a single job there can be the multiple steps, so you need to also specify the steps, and then the action, that what actually actions you are going to use to perform that task. And at the last there are runners. So in the GitHub actions, we actually, the main difference I can say you about the Jenkins and GitHub action is that you can see the Jenkins is a self-hosted, right? So the GitHub actions actually use their own runners, and you can use your own self-hosted runners as well. So the main component over here I can say is the runner. So this is the basic introduction about the GitHub action. Is there any question about the GitHub actions? You can ask me so that we can move forward. Is there any
You
question?
can go ahead. You can
Okay.
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So just consider a simple example about the GitHub action. So you can see the very first step I mentioned over here, that is in your repository, create the .github folder workflow directory to store your workflow file. So whenever you need to create your GitHub action workflow, there is an important note that you have to create your workflow file under the .github/workflow directory itself. If you are creating your workflow file in any other location, it will not gonna trigger, or it will not gonna execute whenever there are particular event happen. So this is the important note that you need to remember, that your workflow file has to be present into your .github workflow directory. So just create a .github workflow directory and create your own workflow file. Let's consider that is the learn GitHub actions.yml, and add the following code. So this is an example code that you can use, but as per your application and as per your requirement, you can specify your actions and you can specify your own jobs, that what jobs you actually need to execute. And at the last, commit these changes and push them to your GitHub repository. So you can see in this example, there is a name specified. Okay, just a second. See here, the first step in our workflow file would be the name, that what name you have to specify for your workflow. And you can see the second, that is the on:push. It means that you need to specify the event, like on which event you have to trigger your workflow. So you can see I mention over here is the push. It means that whenever you are gonna actually push onto a particular branch, after that you need to specify the branch name. So whenever a push event occur for that particular branch, your workflow gonna start executing, and whatever the jobs you have specified over there are will get executed. So this is the very basic example of that how exactly we can create our workflow. So what are the different essential features of GitHub Actions whenever we use the GitHub Actions? So the very first I can say is using variables in your workflow. Let's suppose at the time of creating your workflow file, you have to create or use some environments variables so that you can specify in your action or in a job as a env. You can see this is the steps for a particular job. So I specify the name that is connect to PostgreSQL, and there would be an step that is the run node client.js. I need to execute this file, and let's suppose for performing this action, I need to use some of the environment variables. So for specifying this, we can write the env, and then we can write the multiple environment variable that we want to use. The second, that add script to your workflow. Let's suppose you also need to execute some of the scripts file for as your action or as your step, so you can also do that. So you can see in the run section I have specified, you just need to specify the path of your file, and you can run this file. So this is the way that how we can exactly use the script file in your step. The third is sharing data between jobs. So as we can define the multiple jobs in your workflow, so let's suppose I am creating an artifact for my application, and in the second jobs I want to use that build artifact from the previous job. So the feature of GitHub Action is that you can share the data between the job. It means that uh, per, let's suppose I have created a job which is creating the artifact for my application. So for that, in the second job, I want to use that artifact. So you can use this download a single artifact, this action, so that you can actually download this in the second job, whatever the job you are gonna creating. So for the purpose of actually using or downloading this artifact, you have to first upload that artifact in the first job. So for that purpose, there is an action which is already placed, which is already created by the GitHub. So this is the upload output file. It means that once your artifact is get created, you have to upload it first, and in the second job you can then download. So these are some essential features. There are many more, but these are the most important that we have to know. So there are different types of actions that we can create with the help of GitHub Actions. So the very first is Docker container. So Docker container, we all know that what exactly the Docker containers are. So the Docker container packages the environment with the GitHub Actions code. It means that whenever you are going to use this type of action, it will consider the whole environment. The second is the JavaScript. JavaScript actions can run directly on a runner machine and separate that actions code from the environment used to run the code. So just like the Docker container, as we consider the whole environment, that what kind of OS we are going to use, what kind of dependency and the libraries we will use, there is a difference between the JavaScript and Docker container. As in the JavaScript, we will only consider the action code rather than considering the whole environment. The third is composite run step. So let's suppose you just want to create your own actions, not you don't want to use the actions which are already present in the marketplace. You can create your own actions and use that as well. So the composite run step actions allows you to combine multiple workflow run steps within one action. So these are the different types of actions that we can actually use or create in your GitHub. So the next point is choosing location for your action. As I said, there is a third action type, which is the composite action. It means that we can create our own actions and we can store them so that we can use that after from anywhere. So what exactly the location should be for those customized actions? So let's suppose if you are creating an action for the other people for not for your own purpose. So in that case, you can keep that action code into this own repo. It means that for the user will can exactly understand that what exactly the action is going to do, and what kind of source code and what kind of actually events are happening with the help of those actions. So the second is, let's suppose you are creating this action for your own purpose, then you can keep it anywhere. It means you can separate the code from the real source code repository, you can keep it anywhere as you want. And but the best practice for this, let's suppose you want to store your actions, so the best practice is to follow like .github actions and actions. Say you have to create the .github folder in, and then the subfolder should be actions, and you can specify your whatever the actions you have created over there. So this is the best practice that we can follow. Now let's see the different triggers that we can use at the time of creating our GitHub Actions workflow. So over here, that in the demo section, we'll actually see that how we can containerize your application with the help of GitHub Actions, and how we can publish this image into a registry. So there are some other, this is the main basic code that we are actually going to take a look into in the demo. But there are some different types of trigger that we can use. As we know that we can trigger our workflow in the push action, or let's suppose we create a pull request. So those are the basics event trigger that will happen. But let's suppose you want to trigger a specific workflow manually. So in that case, what will you do? So in that case, you need to use the workflow dispatch event. So it means that, let's suppose whatever the actions happen into your GitHub, if let's suppose you have push or you have created a pull request, but you don't want to trigger your workflow, you have to create we can consider, let's suppose there is an production workflow that we need to deploy our application at the prod environment. In that case, we will not trigger that by on the basis of any event. Let's suppose we want to keep it manual, so in that case we will use the workflow dispatch event. So using this event, you can run a specific workflow manually through the user interface of the GitHub Actions. Okay, so you can see, let's suppose I have created the workflow that with the name that is manual workflow. So whenever I use workflow dispatch event, in that case, you will see in the GitHub UI, the run workflow button over there. And you can choose a branch, that on which branch you have to actually execute your workflow. So this is the one event that we can use to trigger our application. The next event is repository dispatch. Now let's consider there is a case that there are we can have the multiple workflow for our single application, right? So let's suppose there are some dependency between those workflow, and we have to trigger one workflow 2 after the workflow 1. So how you can actually achieve that? So with the help of repository dispatch event, you can achieve that. So whenever you are going to use the repository dispatch event, you can trigger the second workflow. But for the purpose of using repository dispatch event, there is an one note, like you can only use this event on your default branch. It means that, as we all know, the default branch for our GitHub would be the main or master, we can say. So it will work for this branch. Or let's suppose you have to try on the another branch, you can first change your default branch, and you can use, or you can trigger for that branch as well. So there are some steps that we need to follow for the repository dispatch event. So whenever you need to trigger a workflow from another workflow, you have to first use the post API endpoint. You can see over here, and we need to mention some of the attribute like repos owner, and after at the end you have to mention the dispatches. The example you can consider, that is the https api github.com and hello world dispatch. This is the my repo. So this is an example. The second that we need to follow for this post request is that you need to specify some attributes. The first is add a custom media type in the accept header. So you can see over here, we need to add this in the post request. The second is we need to specify the API token for the purpose of authorization, that actually you are authorized to access this repo and hit the request. So you need to mention the API token over there, and at the last specify an event type in the post body. So whenever you are going to use this repository dispatch event, it will also execute based on the event type, that what type of event you can specify. So let's suppose you did not specify any event type. So in that case, it will trigger all the workflow which have the repository dispatch event. Okay. And let's suppose you have specified the event type particular, like just like do something. In that case only, it will only trigger the workflow which has repository dispatch event trigger and with the event type do something. So this is the repository dispatch event. Now let's check. I will show you that is how we can create our workflow and how we can containerize our application and how we can push our image to the Docker registry with the help of GitHub Actions. So you can see there are some different workflows I have created. You can see the default directory for my workflows are .github workflows. Okay. So all the workflows are stored over here. So you can see maven.yaml file. So it starts with the name, that what exactly the name I have to give for my workflow. So this is the Java CI with Maven, and you can see I have specified that on which event I have to execute my workflow. So I have specified the push and the branches feature option in demo. Okay. And you can see the second event I have also mentioned, that is the repository dispatch, and the type is trigger workflow. And there are different jobs I have created. So you can see in the job section I have created the job one with the name is build and the runs on Ubuntu latest. So it is our containerized action. uh, so you can see for the job one I have mentioned different step. Sorry. So the first step that I have mentioned is like as we need to build this application, I need the Java. So I use the action, that is action checkout setup JDK, and actually uses the action setup Java at the rate. So these actions are actually already present in the GitHub Marketplace. There are 10,000 plus actions already created, so we can directly use them in our workflows. So for the purpose of Java, I use these actions, and then the second step would be build with Maven. I need to build my application. So this is the name of my step, and I actually executed the command that I need to execute for the building of my application. And the third, as in the build step, there is an artifact created. Now what I need to do is that I need to create and containerize image for my application, and I need to push that image. So push my image into my Docker Hub account. So for that purpose, what I need to do is that I need to first log into the Docker Hub, then build image, and then push. Those are the steps that we need to follow. So you can see we have set up the Docker build-x. So this is the actions that we need to first execute whenever we need to use the Docker. And then we have set up the Docker, and then I need to log into my Docker Hub account. So you can see this is the third step that I have used, and the action would be Docker login, as I need to log into my Docker Hub account first. Whenever I need to push my image, we need to first log in, right? So for this, we use some environment variable. We need to use some secret, that is the Docker Hub username and Docker Hub password. I will show you that where those username, where those secrets are present, and we need to create those first so that we can use them into our workflow. And then the step would be the Docker push, build and push Docker image. So for this, the action would be Docker build push action. And you can see I have specified some of the attribute, that is the dot slash docker file, the path of my docker file. The push should be true, as I need to push this docker image to my Docker Hub account, and what type of tag you have to specify. So this is the tag that is the latest. So all those actions are actually inbuilt. You guys can directly use those. You don't need to create anything by your own. You just need to specify those actions and just need to provide the information as per your requirement, just like the tag, what should be the tag, what kind of Docker Hub username, Docker Hub password of your account. So these are the steps that we need to follow to containerize our applications and push to our Docker registry. So the next step, so this is the job one. We can see to containerize application and push this image. The next step that you can see, the trigger next workflow. So as I said that there are some other event triggers that we can use. So let's suppose now I want to trigger the workflow with the name that is trigger workflow2.yaml. So in that case, how I'm going to trigger this workflow? You can see I have created the step trigger next workflow, and here you can see I'm going to actually trigger this workflow, the post command that I'll do. I told you before that how exactly we can use this. So you can see whenever I'm going to push on this branch, you can see there will be two event occur. The one is push on the branch feature ops in it, and the second one is repository dispatch. So on those event, what exactly will happen on the push? This workflow will start get executing, and you can see there is a repository dispatch event with the type trigger workflow 2. So when it comes to this step, it will actually find the workflow which has event type trigger workflow 2. So you can see over here only there is an trigger workflow2.yaml file which has the repository dispatch event with the type trigger workflow 2. It means that it will find this workflow. Actually, it will check all the workflows present and then check the types that whether it is matches or not. So if it finds the exact match, it will start executing this workflow too. So this is how the execution will happen. So let's consider, I just move this and we push it on the branch. Which you can see I have performed one event, and you will see that there is one build started with the Java CI with Maven. The build push, you can see the details over here. So you can see there is start executing this workflow, but I think there are some lots of GitHub workflows are actually executing. It is going in loop, so you will not able to see the exact logs over here. So I'll show you the previous one that I have did. Just give me a second. Okay, so you can see previously I have triggered this on the same branch 13 hours ago. So I'll show you the logs, what exactly it will do. So if you check the logs, what it will do exactly, it will log into your Docker Hub account. After login succeeded, it will actually build your application, and then it will push your image to your Docker Hub account. So there should be an Docker Hub account present, and you can check whether the image is actually going to push or not. So this is my Docker Hub account, and you can see with the name that is app, and the tag is the latest. This is pushed before 5 minutes ago. I already triggered that. So this is how our GitHub Actions will execute. And once you can see the trigger next workflow action, it will trigger the workflow to yaml.ml. And once it is acknowledged successfully, as you can see the acknowledged form from remote repository, it will execute the steps as well. And whatever the next steps you have mentioned into your workflow, it will start executing those. So this is how the GitHub Actions will actually work. So now, as I shown you the different event that we can use for, that is, let's suppose we want to trigger the manual, we want to create a manual workflow. So you can see this Java CI with Maven workflow will start executing whenever I push, right? And the workflow too started executing after the steps. But let's suppose you can see the manual workflow is not get started executing. So whenever we need to start to execute this workflow, we actually need to click on the run workflow. You will only able to see this button when we have mentioned the workflow dispatch event over there, because this event is actually used for the manual workflow. And let's suppose we have click on the run workflow, it will start executing. Yeah, or you can see it is also gone into the queue. It will take some time to pick the runner if it is available, and will start executing all the steps that we have mentioned in your workflow file. So this is how we can create the manual workflow as well. And you can see there is another options as the we need we can actually select the branch even that on which branch you have to execute this your manual workflow. But there is a note that this workflow file is also has to be present on that branch, then and then only you can able to execute. So you can select the branch from over here as well and start executing your GitHub Actions workflow. So as we know that we use some of the secrets like Docker Hub username and the password, we need to also keep the API access token to in our workflow files to execute those. So how where we have actually stored that? So we have to create the secrets for our GitHub first. So you can see that I have mentioned that is secret.dockerhub username. It means that the Docker Hub username should be present in the secret for this repo. So you can see for that you have to go to the settings. You will be able to see the secrets and variable. In the section action, you can create the new repo secret. So these are the all secrets that I have already created and used in my GitHub workflow. So there is an access token, Docker Hub password, and Docker Hub username that you need to specify and you need to use into your workflow. So that's all we can how exactly use the GitHub Actions. Is there any question?